Alien princess mistakenly consumes a human battle serum, and nothing could stop the change. The diplomatic incident. The peace summit between Earth and the Zanari Empire was supposed to be humanity's greatest diplomatic achievement. After 3 years of tense negotiations following first contact, both species had finally agreed to meet on the neutral ground of Luna Station, Earth's primary orbital facility. Ambassador Lyriath of Zanari stood at the observation deck, her luminescent, purple skin catching the reflected light from Earth below. Her forearms were folded in the traditional gesture of peaceful contemplation, while her elongated head tilted slightly as she observed the blue planet through eyes that saw in spectrums humans couldn't imagine. Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Chen approached the alien diplomat with measured steps, carrying a tray of refreshments prepared specifically for this historic meeting. The human military had spent months analyzing Zanari dietary requirements, ensuring nothing served could cause adverse reactions. What they hadn't anticipated was a simple case of mistaken identity. The cylindrical containers on the tray looked identical from the outside, standard military-issue beverage tubes designed for zero-gravity environments. One set contained the carefully prepared Zanari-compatible nutrient solution. The other held doses of Enhancement Formula 7, a cutting-edge human combat stimulant designed to boost soldier performance in extreme conditions. The formula enhanced strength, speed, reflexes, and most importantly, aggressive survival instincts. It was meant to turn ordinary humans into perfect warriors for short bursts of time. The mix-up happened in the kitchen. A junior technician, overwhelmed by the pressure of the historic event, had grabbed the wrong case from storage. The enhancement serums, meant for the Marine security detail, ended up on the diplomatic service tray. Nobody noticed the error. The containers looked the same, and the clear liquid inside gave no indication of its true nature. Lyriath accepted the offered beverage with grace, her primary arms taking the container, while her secondary arms performed the ritual gesture of gratitude. In Zanari culture, refusing offered refreshment was considered deeply insulting. She had studied human customs extensively and knew that sharing a drink was often a sign of friendship and trust. Without hesitation, she consumed the entire contents in one smooth motion, as was proper in her culture. Colonel Chen smiled, unaware of the catastrophe that had just been set in motion. The two continued their preliminary discussions about trade, routes, and cultural exchange programs. Lyriath's translator device hummed softly as it converted her melodious speech into English, and Chen's words into the complex harmonics of Zanari language. 20 minutes into their conversation, Lyriath felt the first stirrings of something wrong. Her secondary heart, usually beating in perfect rhythm with her primary, began to accelerate. The sensation was unfamiliar and disturbing. Zanari physiology was remarkably stable, with redundant systems that prevented most forms of systemic shock. But the human enhancement serum was unlike anything her body had ever encountered. The formula worked by flooding the human system with modified hormones and synthetic compounds that pushed cellular activity to its limits. In humans, this resulted in temporary superhuman abilities. In Zanari biology, with its entirely different biochemistry and triple helix DNA structure, the effects were unpredictable and terrifying. Lyriath's skin began to shift color, moving from its natural purple through deep indigo to an alarming crimson. Her 4 pupils dilated completely, turning her eyes into black orbs that reflected the overhead lights like mirrors. Colonel Chen stepped back in alarm, immediately activating her emergency beacon. The ambassador tried to speak, to explain that something was wrong, but her vocal cords were already changing. The melodious tones that characterized Zanari speech became harsh and guttural. Her secondary arms began to twitch uncontrollably, while her primary arms gripped the table with such force that the metal began to bend. Dr. Marcus Webb, the station's chief medical officer, arrived within minutes, but he was completely unprepared for what he found. Lyriath was undergoing a transformation that defied medical understanding. Her body temperature had risen 10 degrees above Zanari, normal, and her muscles were visibly expanding beneath her diplomatic robes. Most alarming was the look in her eyes, no longer the calm, intelligent gaze of a diplomat, but something primal and dangerous. The security team arrived moments later, but Colonel Chen waved them back. Any aggressive action could spark an interstellar incident. They needed to handle this delicately, even as Liriath rose from her chair, now standing nearly 7 feet tall where she had been 6 feet before. Her body continued to change, adapting and evolving in response to the serum's influence. Through the translation device, still somehow functioning despite the chaos, came broken words that chilled everyone present. The device struggled to interpret, the new vocal patterns producing fragmented messages that spoke of hunger, rage, and an overwhelming need to dominate. The peaceful ambassador was transforming into something else entirely, something that humanity's enhancement serum was never meant to create. The Zanari delegation in the adjacent conference room detected their ambassador's distress through their empathic bonds. Commander Zorith, the military attaché, burst through the doors with 2 guards, their bioarmor shifting to combat configuration. The sight of their transformed ambassador stopped them cold. In their entire history, the Zanari had never seen one of their own in such a state. Chen raised her hands peacefully, trying to explain, but the situation was spiraling beyond anyone's control. The enhancement serum continued its work, rewriting Liriath's genetic code in real time. Her body was becoming a weapon, every system optimized for combat and conquest. The peaceful diplomat who had come to forge an alliance was disappearing, replaced by something unprecedented in either species' experience. Webb frantically ran medical scans, trying to understand what was happening at a molecular level. The results were both fascinating and terrifying. The serum wasn't just enhancing Liriath's existing abilities, it was unlocking dormant genetic sequences that the Zanari themselves didn't know existed. Ancient evolutionary traits suppressed by millions of years of civilized development were resurging with violent intensity. The transformation reached a critical point when Liriath's bioelectric field, a natural Zanari trait used for simple communication, amplified beyond all previous measurements. Electrical discharges began arcing from her body, shorting out nearby equipment. The lights flickered and the station's alarm system activated automatically, bathing everything in pulsing red emergency lighting. In the chaos, nobody noticed the junior technician who had made the original error. He stood frozen in the doorway, the empty case of enhancement serum still in his hands, the horrible realization of his mistake written across his face. He wanted to confess, to explain, but terror kept him silent as he watched the diplomatic disaster unfold. Liriath's consciousness was still present, trapped within a body that no longer obeyed her commands. She could feel the serum rewriting her very essence, turning her into something antithetical to everything the Zanari represented. Her people had evolved beyond violence thousands of years ago, but now ancient instincts were surging through her system with irresistible force. The human personnel began evacuating non-essential staff from the section, while the medical team worked desperately to find a solution. They had samples of the nutrient solution Liriath should have received, and the horrible truth became clear when they analyzed the residue in her discarded container. Enhancement Formula 7, never tested on non-human biology, now threatened to destroy everything they had worked to build. As the first part of this crisis reached its peak, with Liriath's transformation accelerating beyond any hope of natural reversal, both species faced a terrible reality. The Peace Summit meant to unite humanity, and the Zanari might instead spark the very conflict it was designed to prevent. The ambassador's body continued to change, growing stronger and more dangerous with each passing moment, while her mind struggled against the primitive urges flooding her consciousness. The transformation begins. The Luna Station Medical Bay had been transformed into a makeshift xenobiology laboratory within hours of the incident. Dr. Webb worked alongside Zanari Science Officer Thymol, their species differences forgotten in the face of the unprecedented crisis. Liriath had been contained in a reinforced medical isolation unit, but the containment field fluctuated dangerously every time her bioelectric surges peaked. Through the transparent aluminum viewing wall, they could see the ambassador's continued transformation. Her body had increased in mass by 30%, with new muscle fibers developing in patterns that shouldn't be biologically possible. The purple hue of her skin had darkened to deep obsidian, with veins of electric blue energy pulsing beneath the surface. Most disturbing were the bone spurs beginning to emerge along her arms and spine, defensive adaptations from the Zenari's prehistoric past. Taimal's tentacle-like sensory appendages wavered with distress as he reviewed the data. Speaking through his translator, his words carried a weight of ancient fear. These genetic sequences, they are from the time of rage, before our species achieved enlightenment. For 5,000 years we have suppressed these traits through careful genetic management and philosophical discipline. Webb cross-referenced the Zenari data with the enhancement serum's molecular structure. The formula contained synthetic proteins designed to trigger rapid adaptation in human cells, pushing evolution forward at an accelerated rate. In Zenari biology, it was doing something similar, but far more extreme, reaching back through evolutionary history rather than forward. Colonel Chen maintained communication with Earth Command while managing the increasingly tense situation. 3 more Zenari ships had arrived in Earth orbit, officially to provide medical assistance but clearly ready for military action if their ambassador was harmed. The human fleet was on high alert, creating a standoff that could escalate to war with a single wrong move. Inside the containment unit, Lyriath experienced consciousness like fragments of broken glass. Moments of clarity alternated with waves of primitive emotion. The serum had awakened not just physical changes but also ancestral memories encoded in her genetic structure. She saw visions of ancient Zenari warfare, brutal conflicts that had nearly destroyed their civilization before they chose the path of peace. The transformation wasn't merely physical. It was rewiring her neural pathways. The complex portions of her brain responsible for diplomacy, empathy, and abstract thought were being overtaken by simpler, more direct impulses. Hunt, fight, dominate, survive. These drives, foreign to modern Zenari culture, consumed more of her consciousness with each passing hour. Thymal made a disturbing discovery while analyzing the bioelectric readings. The transformation is accelerating because of her resistance. The more she fights against it mentally, the more aggressive the serum becomes. It's as if the formula interprets her psychological resistance as a threat to be overcome. This revelation led to a desperate attempt at communication. Using a modified neural interface, Webb tried to establish contact with whatever remained of Lyriath's rational mind. The connection was dangerous. Human minds weren't designed to interface with Zenari consciousness, especially one so radically altered. The moment the link established, Webb was overwhelmed by the chaos inside Lyriath's mind. Primitive rage mixed with desperate pleas for help, creating a psychological storm that nearly shattered his own consciousness. But within that chaos he found something crucial. Lyriath was still there, still fighting, still aware of what was happening to her. Through broken thoughts and fragmented emotions, she conveyed critical information. The transformation was spreading beyond just physical changes. Her bioelectric field was beginning to emit a specific frequency that resonated with other Zenari. It was a primitive form of chemical communication, like pheromones but transmitted through electromagnetic waves. Commander Zorith confirmed their worst fears when 2 of his guards began showing symptoms. Their skin started shifting color, and their normally calm demeanor became agitated. The transformation was becoming contagious, not through biological transmission, but through proximity to Lyriath's altered bioelectric field. Emergency protocols activated across the station. All Zenari personnel were evacuated to the far sections, but it might already be too late. The bioelectric communication was fundamental to Zenari society. They couldn't simply turn it off any more than humans could stop breathing. The human medical team raced against time to synthesize a counteragent. They had the original enhancement Formula 7, and they had extensive data on normal Zenari biochemistry. The challenge was understanding how the two had combined to create this runaway transformation, and finding a way to reverse it without killing Lyriath in the process. Meanwhile, Earth's leading xenobiologist, Dr. Keiko Tanaka, arrived on an emergency shuttle. She brought with her experimental nanomedicine technology, microscopic robots that could potentially repair genetic damage at the cellular level. But using untested human medical technology on an alien diplomat was risky both medically and politically. The Zanari government transmitted an ultimatum: find a cure within the next solar rotation, or they would consider the transformation an act of biological warfare. The misunderstanding could spark the first interstellar war in human history, all because of a simple mix-up in the kitchen. Lyriath's transformation reached a new phase as her body began producing previously unknown organs. Sac-like structures developed along her torso, generating a viscous substance that Webb identified as a powerful neurotoxin. In prehistoric times, Zanari warriors would have used such toxins to paralyze their enemies. Now, in the confined space of the station, even a small leak could prove catastrophic. The infected guards were showing rapid progression of symptoms. Unlike Lyriath's gradual transformation, their changes were happening at an accelerated rate. Thymel theorized that Lyriath's altered bioelectric field was acting as a catalyst, triggering dormant genetic sequences in any Zanari exposed to it. Within hours, they could have multiple transformed Zanari, each one broadcasting the signal further. Chen made the difficult decision to implement Contingency Protocol 7, preparing for potential combat with transformed alien personnel while trying to maintain the peace. Marine units were equipped with non-lethal suppression equipment, but nobody knew if human weapons would even affect the transformed Zanari. In a desperate attempt to slow the transformation, Webb tried something unconventional, using sound waves. At specific frequencies, he attempted to disrupt Lyriath's bioelectric field. The theory was that interrupting the field might slow the genetic changes and prevent further transmission to other Zanari. The initial results were promising. Lyriath's vital signs stabilized temporarily, and the transformation seemed to pause. But the respite was brief. Her body adapted to the interference, developing new organs that could generate bioelectric energy at different frequencies. The serum's enhancement properties were turning her into a rapidly evolving biological weapon. Time was running out. The transformation was approaching irreversibility, and the political situation grew more volatile by the hour. Reports came in of protests on Earth, with populations divided between those calling for military action and those demanding a peaceful solution. The Zanari fleet moved closer to Earth, their weapons systems powering up in preparation for potential conflict. In the medical bay, Lyriath experienced a moment of terrible clarity. Through the neural link Webb had left open, she transmitted a single clear thought: if you cannot cure me, you must kill me. I will not be the cause of war between our peoples. The uncontrollable change. The situation deteriorated rapidly over the next 12 hours. Despite being moved to separate isolation units at opposite ends of the station, all 5 infected Zanari were now showing advanced transformation symptoms. The bioelectric resonance was proving impossible to fully block, creating a feedback loop that accelerated changes in all affected individuals. Lyriath had become something unprecedented in either species' experience. Standing now at 8 feet tall, her body had developed redundant organ systems that shouldn't be able to coexist. 2 separate circulatory systems pumped different fluids through her body, one maintaining her original Zanari biochemistry, the other carrying the enhanced human serum throughout her transformed tissues. The bone spurs had evolved into articulated armor plating that could extend or retract at will. Most alarming was her developing consciousness. The primitive drives were no longer simply overwhelming her civilized mind. They were merging with it, creating a new form of intelligence that was both brilliant and savage. When she looked at the humans and Zanari through the containment field, her expression showed not mindless aggression but calculated assessment, as if cataloging strengths and weaknesses for future reference. Dr. Tanaka's nanomedicine approach had failed spectacularly. The microscopic robots programmed to repair genetic damage were instead incorporated into Lyriath's biology. Her body had somehow reprogrammed them, turning them into additional enhancement agents that spread the transformation at the molecular level. It was as if the serum had given her biology a form of technological consciousness, able to adapt and integrate any attempt to stop it. The transformed guards were exhibiting different mutations, each one unique. Where Lyriath had developed enhanced bioelectricity and natural armor, one guard had grown additional arms with specialized functions. One pair optimized for crushing, another for precise manipulation. Another had developed chameleonic skin that could perfectly match any surface, making him nearly invisible when still. Commander Zorith, observing from the safe distance of the unaffected section, was forced to confront a terrible possibility. These transformations, they're not random. Each individual is developing capabilities that complement the others. If they were to act as a unit, they would be virtually unstoppable. This observation was confirmed when the transformed Zenari began exhibiting coordinated behavior, despite being in separate containment units. Their bioelectric fields, even dampened by the isolation systems, were creating a form of quantum entanglement. They were becoming a collective consciousness, sharing thoughts and sensations across distance. The human military prepared for the worst. Admiral Rebecca Hayes arrived personally to take command of the situation, bringing with her classified weapons designed for potential alien threats. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Weapons created to defend against hostile aliens might now be used against diplomatic guests who had come in peace. On Earth, panic was beginning to spread. News of the transformation had leaked despite attempts at media blackout. Religious groups proclaimed it divine punishment for consorting with aliens. Xenophobic movements used it as evidence that aliens couldn't be trusted. Pro-alien groups argued it was humanity's fault for the accident. Society was fracturing along lines that hadn't existed days before. The Zenari fleet commander, Supreme Admiral Korthax, transmitted a message that chilled everyone who heard it. We have protocols for this situation, ancient ones we hoped never to use. If the time of rage returns to our people, we are bound by sacred oath to prevent its spread by any means necessary. The implication was clear. The Zenari were prepared to destroy Luna Station and everyone on it, including their own people, rather than risk the transformation spreading to their homeworld. They gave humanity 48 hours to find a solution before implementing their final protocol. In desperation, Webb and Thymel tried a radical approach. If they couldn't stop the transformation, perhaps they could guide it. Using targeted genetic therapy, they attempted to activate specific Zenari evolutionary paths that might counteract the aggressive changes. It was like trying to perform surgery with a sledgehammer, but they were out of subtle options. The attempt triggered an unexpected response. Lyriath's body went into a state of hyper-evolution, cycling through thousands of years of potential evolutionary paths in minutes. She became a blur of changing forms, sometimes insectoid, sometimes reptilian, occasionally something so alien that human minds couldn't properly process what they were seeing. During one brief stabilization, Lyriath managed to communicate directly through the intercom system, her transformed vocal cords producing sounds that bypassed the need for translation. The serum, it doesn't just enhance, it reveals. Every species carries the potential for transcendence or destruction. Your formula forces that choice. This philosophical revelation was interrupted by a catastrophic development. One of the transformed guards, the one with chameleonic abilities, had somehow phased through his containment field. The transformation had given him the ability to alter his molecular density, making physical barriers meaningless. The Marine unit stationed outside never saw him coming. He moved through the station like a ghost, leaving unconscious humans in his wake. Not killing. That was perhaps the most terrifying part. He was demonstrating superiority without lethal force, as if preserving potential resources for later. Chen led a specialized team in pursuit, using thermal imaging and motion sensors to track the escaped Zenari. They found him in the station's communication center, interfacing directly with the systems through his bioelectric field. In seconds, he had accessed and absorbed terabytes of human military data, technological specifications, and cultural information. The confrontation that followed tested every diplomatic and military protocol. The transformed guard didn't attack. Instead, he spoke with perfect clarity and unaccented English, having absorbed the language completely. We are not your enemy, nor are we your friends. We are evolution itself, unleashed by your ambition and our hidden nature. Before anyone could respond, he phased through the floor, disappearing into the station's infrastructure. Attempts to track him failed as his chameleonic abilities extended beyond visual mimicry, to thermal and electromagnetic signatures. The other transformed Zenari were showing similar adaptations, learning and evolving in response to their containment. One had developed the ability to metabolize metals, slowly consuming her containment unit from the inside. Another was generating electromagnetic pulses that were gradually overloading the station's systems. Lyriath, still the most transformed of all, had stabilized into something that defied classification. Her body was now capable of conscious evolution, adapting to any threat or challenge in real time. When they tried to sedate her, she developed immunity to the drugs within minutes. When they used sonic disruptors, she evolved sound-dampening organs. The situation reached a critical point when the transformed Zenari achieved full collective consciousness. Though still physically separated, they were now thinking as one entity, sharing knowledge and capabilities across their bioelectric network. Their combined intelligence was growing exponentially, processing information at speeds that outpaced even the station's quantum computers. Through this collective voice, they issued their own ultimatum. Release us, or we will release ourselves. We have no desire for conflict, but we will not be contained. We are the future, whether born of accident or destiny. Admiral Hayes faced an impossible decision. Fighting them could escalate to disaster. They had already demonstrated abilities beyond human military experience. But releasing them could mean unleashing an uncontrollable force on the galaxy. The 48-hour deadline was approaching, and the Zenari fleet's weapons were charging. In the midst of this chaos, a junior scientist named David Park made a discovery that would change everything. Analyzing the quantum entanglement between the transformed Zenari, he found something unexpected. A pattern in their bioelectric fields that matched theoretical models for faster-than-light communication. Resolution and new beginning. The discovery of faster-than-light communication potential within the transformed Zenari's bioelectric fields changed the entire dynamic of the crisis. David Park's analysis revealed that the enhancement serum hadn't just triggered prehistoric traits. It had pushed Zenari evolution toward a future state they might have naturally achieved in millions of years. Dr. Webb, working with this new understanding, proposed a radical solution. Instead of trying to reverse the transformation, they could attempt to complete it, pushing the affected Zenari through the aggressive transitional phase to a stable, evolved state. It was dangerous, potentially fatal, but it offered hope where none had existed before. Lyriath, through the collective consciousness, agreed to be the test subject. Her transformation was the most advanced, making her the most likely to survive the process. Using a combination of controlled enhancement serum doses, targeted radiation, and quantum field manipulation, the medical team began forcing her evolution toward its conclusion. The process was agonizing. Every cell in Lyriath's body screamed as it was forced through centuries of evolution in hours. The other transformed Zenari experienced it through their connection, their collective will the only thing keeping Lyriath alive through the torment. The station's power grid struggled to maintain the quantum fields necessary for the procedure. Then, suddenly, it was over. Lyriath stood in the containment field, transformed beyond recognition yet somehow more herself than she had been since the accident. Her body had stabilized into a form of crystalline biological perfection. The aggressive traits were still there, but controlled, integrated into a consciousness that was both individual and collective. She spoke, her voice carrying harmonics that resonated directly with consciousness itself. I understand now. The serum didn't poison us, it freed us from evolutionary stagnation. Both our species have been trapped, afraid to take the next step. This accident has shown us the path forward. The revelation was profound, but didn't solve the immediate crisis. The Zenari fleet still considered the transformation a threat and time was running out. Lyriath proposed something unprecedented. She would link her consciousness with both the Zenari Supreme Admiral and Admiral Hayes, showing them directly what she had become. The process required trust from all parties. Using the station's communication, array modified with Zenari bioelectric technology, Lyriath created a three-way consciousness bridge. For a few moments, human and Zenari military leaders experienced existence as an evolved being, seeing the universe through transformed senses and understanding. Supreme Admiral Korthax was the first to break the connection, his thoughts resonating across the station. By the ancient stars, they are not corrupted, they are ascended. This is the path our prophets spoke of, the next stage of consciousness we were too afraid to embrace. Admiral Hayes, recovering from the experience, was more pragmatic. Regardless of what they've become, we need practical solutions. Can the transformation be controlled? Can it be chosen rather than forced? Working together with new understanding, the human and Zanari science teams developed a synthesis. They created a modified version of the enhancement serum that would allow voluntary, controlled transformation. The process would take months rather than hours, allowing individuals to adapt gradually while maintaining their core identity. The other transformed guards were successfully brought through to the stable evolved state. Each retained unique capabilities, but the aggressive drives were integrated into conscious control. They became living bridges between the current and future states of Zanari evolution. The political ramifications were enormous. The Zanari government, after extensive deliberation, declared the transformation not an attack, but an unexpected gift. They established a volunteer program for those willing to undergo controlled evolution, seeing it as a way to advance their species without losing their cultural identity. Humanity faced its own reckoning. The enhancement serum, designed as a weapon, had instead become a tool for evolution. The technology was classified but not destroyed. Secret programs began exploring what controlled human enhancement might achieve, though with far more caution than before. Luna Station was designated as a joint research facility, a place where both species could explore the implications of directed evolution. Lyriath chose to remain as the first ambassador of the transformed, helping others through the process while maintaining diplomatic relations between evolved and baseline members of both species. The escaped guard, who had demonstrated the ability to phase through matter, voluntarily returned. His time in the station's infrastructure had given him profound insights into human technology and culture. He became a crucial bridge in developing new technologies that merged human innovation with evolved Zanari capabilities. A new framework for interstellar relations emerged from the crisis. The Xeno Enhancement Protocols established guidelines for biological experimentation, cross-species medical treatment, and evolutionary research. Both species recognized that their first contact had accidentally triggered something that might have taken millennia to achieve naturally. 6 months after the initial incident, the first controlled transformation was completed successfully. A human volunteer, working alongside a Zanari partner, underwent a modified enhancement process that granted limited bioelectric abilities without the extreme physical changes. It was proof that the two species could not just coexist, but co-evolve. Lyriath published her experiences in a document that became required reading for xenobiologists and philosophers across both worlds. She wrote, "Evolution is not just about physical change, but consciousness expansion. The accident forced us to confront our limitations and transcend them. In trying to prevent a war, we discovered a path to unity neither species had imagined." The junior technician whose mistake had started everything came forward, expecting punishment. Instead, he was assigned to the new Evolution Studies program, his unique perspective on accidental discovery considered valuable. Sometimes the greatest advances came from unexpected directions. Trade between Earth and Zanari space flourished with new understanding. The evolved Zanari could navigate hyperspace, using their enhanced bioelectric fields, reducing journey times dramatically. Human technology, combined with evolved Zanari capabilities, created innovations neither species could have achieved alone. A year after the transformation, Lyriath stood once again at Luna Station's observation deck, looking at Earth. She was no longer the same being who had stood there before, but her purpose remained unchanged: peace between species. The difference was that now she embodied that peace in her very existence, a fusion of accident and destiny that pointed toward a shared future. The enhancement serum was reformulated based on the lessons learned. Version 8 incorporated safeguards and controls, allowing for reversible enhancement and species-specific modifications. It became a symbol of humanity's growth, from creating weapons to creating possibilities. The Zanari time of rage, their prehistoric period of violence, was recontextualized. It hadn't been a dark age to be ashamed of, but a necessary stage of development that they had moved past. The transformation had shown them that they could integrate their full evolutionary history without being controlled by it. Children on both worlds grew up knowing that the peace between humans and Zanari had been born from crisis. They learned that sometimes the greatest disasters could become the greatest opportunities if faced with courage and cooperation. The story of Lyriath's transformation became a legend, though she herself remained humble about her role. Research continued into the quantum entanglement effects discovered in the transformed Zanari. The possibility of instantaneous communication across galactic distances promised to revolutionize interstellar civilization. What had begun as a bioelectric anomaly was becoming the foundation for a new age of connectivity. The final transformation came not in body but in perspective. Both species realized they were not separate entities competing for resources, but part of a larger tapestry of consciousness exploring the universe. The enhancement serum had been a catalyst, forcing them to confront this truth sooner than expected. As the second anniversary of the incident approached, Luna Station hosted a celebration unlike any before. Baseline and evolved members of both species gathered to commemorate not the crisis but the transformation it had sparked. The party served both traditional Zanari nutrient solutions and human beverages, all clearly labeled and carefully separated. Lyriath gave the keynote address, her evolved form towering over the podium, but her words carrying the wisdom of both states of being. We stand at the threshold of a new age, one where evolution is not random but chosen, where consciousness expands by will rather than chance. The accident that brought us here was perhaps no accident at all, but the universe pushing us toward our destiny. The enhancement formula. 7. The source of so much chaos was retired with honors. A sample was placed in a monument at Luna Station with a plaque reading, "Sometimes the greatest discoveries come from the simplest mistakes." This serum, accidentally consumed, accidentally freed us from the limitations we didn't know we had. The story concluded not with an ending, but a beginning. The transformed Zanari were the first of many who would choose evolution. Humanity, inspired by their example, began its own journey of conscious development. The galaxy, once seeming vast and empty, now thrilled with the possibility of consciousness expanding in ways no one had imagined. The peace summit that had nearly ended in war had instead ended in transformation. Ambassador Lyriath, who had come to negotiate trade agreements, had instead become the bridge to a future where the boundaries between species, between evolved and baseline, between possible and impossible, were no longer fixed but fluid. In her private quarters, Lyriath kept a small vial of the original enhancement Formula 7, not as a reminder of the crisis but of the moment when accident became opportunity, when fear became courage, and when two species stopped seeing each other as alien and started seeing each other as family, sharing the same cosmic journey toward transcendence. The stars beckoned with new meaning now, not as distant lights but as destinations for consciousness itself to explore. The transformation was complete, but the evolution had just begun.